Inside BBI with John and Eric begins now.
All right, well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive in his special shirt, looking nice, Mr. Eric Kennedy. I like it. You're really repping there. We're doing it. We're doing a special one today. We're going to have Dan Duggan of the Athletics going to be on, so we're going to talk a little cap and a little roster. But just to recap real quick before he joins us, we had a good show on Saturday. A lot of questions about the roster. Just anything surprising of when we. Just after we talk to folks that you think, people are kind of focused on, or they think about a lot more maybe than we do. It seemed pretty standard across the board, but there were a few things that stood out.
Yeah, I don't think there were any surprises. I know people are concerned about the offensive line. I've noticed on comments on BBI that my angst over the defensive line seems to have focused some people now on that area. So again, I think if you're objectively looking at the roster on the outside looking in and trying to look at the big picture, I think the fact that they haven't done anything on the defensive line in free agency sort of stands out. So, and it's kind of scary because there really isn't that much depth there. We still have two free agents that I don't think we're going to re-sign. So that makes it even look worse. But I in terms of the questions, I think all the questions were great. I thought that actually went really well. I liked doing the Q&A. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, it was the only thing that was interesting to me is kind of like the discussion back and forth about, I think some people confuse best player available in a way that makes it seem like, I don't care what position he is. If he's just this much above, you just take him. That's not always going to come into play. Like we're not talking the 89 draft, where you've got Derek Thomas and you've got Deion Sanders and you got Barry Sanders. You know what I mean? Like those guys were like off the charts amazing. This draft doesn't have a lot of guys like that. Even the best athletic ones, they have questions.
Joe Schoen or Brian or Harbaugh. Someone said Dable. Harbaugh said at the combine, and I think it was Shane, that again they admitted that the best player available matters, but if it's close, need will come into play. And they said that will even come into play sometimes even when the player is even a little bit better. If he's a lot better, then best player available really comes in. So need, they admitted need does play a role, and I think if you look at every team's drafting history, teams don't draft quarterbacks in the first round if they have a franchise quarterback, who's still in his prime. They just don't do that type of thing. So it's that all teams do that. I do see, and this has been the case since I've been a football fan, and all fans do this of all teams. There are a huge selection of fans that will only draft for need, period, even if the value's not there, and that's just wrong. So you're going to have people out there that say, I don't care. And again, there was somebody on the website the other day, I'm drafting McDonald, the Ohio State defensive tackle, at 5 because the need's so great. No, you can't do that. That's how you want to become a really, really bad football team, do that. Just draft purely based on need, regardless of who's there when you pick. So there are fans that are in that. Now that was an extreme, but there are fans that are way in that direction, and I would tell those fans you just can't do that. So there is supply and demand, there is the real world, and that comes into play.
It's interesting too because you and I talked towards the end of that. The question came up about Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon.
Yeah,
and you like him. I don't dislike him, but then I was thinking, well, we got likely. Yeah, you know what I mean. But at the same time, if you truly think he's the best player, I guess you could make a case for it. If you start looking at some of these guys are really only locked in for a short amount of time. Even if you start planning ahead, look at the Giants' offensive line. Even if they don't make major changes to some of the like John Michael Schmitz, you look at Runyon. Even if they don't do anything with them this year, you're kind of looking ahead to next year. They're probably, at least one of those guys is probably not here, and possibly both, which means then you are looking to stockpile guys ahead of time, even if you have a quality starter in place. So likely could be the guy, but we don't know what Theo Johnson's future is per se.
Right.
It's a new staff. Then who's after that? Fedoni, we don't know.
Right.
Hey, Manhurts is a no. So you could make a case that if Sadiq's high on your list, he could be a guy if you traded down and he was the best available.
Yeah, and that you hit the nail on the head. If they didn't like Theo Johnson, then Sadiq very much would be on the table. Now, everyone who's listening out there, John and I are not saying draft Sadiq right now. We're
Correct.
saying he's a really good player, and if you did trade down and some other guy that you wanted when a trade down isn't there, but Sadiq's still there, then you might consider it. But in that case, probably only if he's so far ahead of everybody else and you don't like Theo Johnson at that point. So, but
right.
That gives you a good example of what we're talking about. So, so I think most of the questions. I mean, was there anything that stood out to you in the questions?
They were
good.
Yeah, no, the questions were great. There was definitely the Giants' need at offensive guard was very obvious with a number of folks who really wanted to see. I know Optimus, for those, I'm naming some of the people in case you don't, it's first time you won't know who we're talking about. But when you're in chat, Optimus is big person on BBI, is big on Inside BBI in the chat room. Been a Giants fan forever, even back to when we did this show back in the early 2000s. He's big on the guard. There's a huge need there, and I can see where a lot of people are saying it. I just can't picture being able to do it 5. Now, if you trade down, that becomes a much better and more palpable decision to make. I just can't do it at 5.
I guess it comes down to this. How highly do you have him graded? If you think he's like a future all-pro guard in the NFL, I don't have a problem. Again, it's like that Quentin Nelson thing that I keep referencing.
Yes.
You wouldn't be unhappy if you got a 10, 12-year-old awesome guard in this draft. In a draft that, again, I don't think is terribly strong at the top of the draft. I don't think it's a strong draft, period. I think there's strong positions. I don't think it's strong. But definitely don't think it's strong at the top of the draft. So I think it's interesting. There was a tweet today from Field Yates on the number of teams that have multiple first-round draft picks in this draft. I don't know if this is the draft that you'd want to have multiple. I mean, it's always great to have multiple first-round picks. Don't get me wrong, but this is not the draft to have I just don't think it's a very strong first-round draft. I think there's still 14 to 18 first-round players in this draft if you listen to the experts. So if you're picking in the 20s, there's not going to be a huge difference between those players and somebody you're going to get in the second round, most likely. They're probably all going to be similar grades for most teams.
I think that's a solid point. When people hear, it's not as strong or it's not as this, I think maybe take that part out of the equation for a second. And the bigger thing to say to that is there are a lot of guys between, let's say, 17 and 48 that have a lot of questions. They have some really good traits, but there's some and so they're not that surefire guaranteed in a different year they would be first round draft picks. These guys probably be second, third round picks depending on the year. It's so teams really have to find the guy who fits what they do, find the guy that they're pretty comfortable with. But since we're already at that point and we've got our guest dropping in, I'm going to bring him on right now. So we're going to add Dan Duggan to the screen.
Yeah.
Dan, first off, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. I wanted to ask you real quick. You've covered the Giants for a while now. You've seen a couple of different, regime changes. Is this offseason just different? Does it just feel different?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like you said, I've done it for a while now. Probably a couple of gray hairs that weren't here when I started covering this team. But I came in right after Coughlin. So obviously the downslope had already begun. And listen, every time there's a regime change, there's a breath of this is different. This is new. But, you're always kind of just hoping and wishing. With Harbaugh is the first guy who's come in with a proven track record. So that credibility he brings from day one is the stark difference. Because, again, listen, let's not rewrite history. When Schoen and Daboll came in, everyone was very optimistic. The first year did nothing to dampen that enthusiasm. And obviously, as things progressed, it did not exactly continue on that upper trajectory. There's an ultimate honeymoon phase, though. Everyone got excited about Joe Judge and maybe even Dave Gettleman and Pat Shermer. I don't really know.
Right.
That was really probably wish casting. But it does feel different because, again, there's a proven track record here. There's, like I said, there's credibility. He's made a lot of changes that, probably a long time coming in this organization already. And I think more to come as we get deeper into his tenure. But yeah, definitely feels different. Again, I've been through this, my 5th coaching change, and this is my 11th season on the beat. So I've seen a lot of them, but this one definitely feels different for sure.
Well, I actually, on that note, before we get into the serious questions, one of the themes I've had for a long time is because John and I are so old. We talked about there are fans out there that are in their 20s and 30s who have not seen this team win. And there's a group of reporters along with you that have sort of come in the last 10 years or so who have also not seen this team win. So you can tell me if I'm wrong. I could tell right before they hired Harbaugh, for instance, I think you had reached your limit on Twitter. I was noticing that you were calling the organization out a little bit more than you previously had. Again, the fans were there with you, but you could almost sense your frustration, I think, on X.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I wrote a pretty scathing column, I think, the day after the season ended when they brought Schoen back. That kind of got a lot of traction, we'll say. But I did feel like the fans, it seemed like it hit home. And really, at the end of the day, I wear a couple of different hats. It's the new age here. I'm not just a nuts and bolts beat reporter where I go in, I write a main and notes like you did at a newspaper for a million years. I do a lot of analysis. I do some columns, but I'm not a full-time columnist. But when you do write a column, my feeling is if you're going to write it, you might as well write it hard. So, again, I didn't pussyfoot around that, kind of got right to it. And, again, the fan reaction was overwhelmingly someone tell it like it is, or that's how I feel. Well, you're not really necessarily doing fan service day in and day out, but when you're writing a column that's kind of summing up the ineptitude that's enveloped the franchise for, over a decade, it is going to be raw, and I think you hope that it connects with. If fans read that and were like, "Oh wow, this guy's a little over the top," I don't really feel that strongly. That would have been, it was my views, but I was, I sensed that it would probably connect with fans, and I appreciated that it seemed to have. And then it's funny how quick things can change in this business. 2 weeks later, it's like everyone's raising up Giants ownership on their shoulders because they like Harbaugh and stuff. So hey. Things can change quickly. I'm not by any stretch saying what I wrote had any impact on how they operated. There was a lot of perfect storm that Harbaugh became available. But I think some of the nerves I hit on, I think, Harbaugh came in and felt like, things need to change here too. So again, not that it had anything to do with what I wrote. I think I was just along the right path.
Oh, I wouldn't undersell yourself. I think things like that were needed and needed to be said. And I think based on the reaction that we did see from fans across the board, you saw the reception of the article. And it was similar to Pat Leonard questioning Joe Schoen in that press conference. And again, I don't think it was mean or vindictive or piling on, but I think it was a legitimate question. And I think fans were waiting for people like you and Pat to basically say, there's a problem here. And so anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I wanted to bring it up because like you said, it's interesting. That was how quickly things can change. Yeah. That article you wrote now would be out of place now, but when you wrote it, it was very much, if Joe Schoen was still here and Kevin Stefanski was the head coach, we might be still having this conversation. So
no, I think that's definitely the case. I think Harbaugh is kind of the thing that has flipped sort of the narrative, the vibes, internally, externally, everything. I think he's the only guy who really was available who could have been capable of doing that.
So I'll start with some roster stuff, and I'll start with the easy stuff before we get to any cap stuff. There were some givens or expectations. Like I know I had them, Eric had them, with some other people. Pretty much nailed. Patrick Ricard seemed like a pretty given. Isaiah Likely, no pun intended, was a likely possibility based on the Harbaugh connection. And then you look at just a couple of other things they've done. You're like, okay. Then there were some things that were given in the opposite direction. It was given that Evan Neal was not going to be back with this team. It was probably given that Josh Ezeudu was not going to be back. And then some things that were kind of questionable, but they came up. Isaiah Hodgins, Devin Singletary. Of those things right there, I mean, which is more surprising to you? The guys that you thought for sure were coming here, did come here, or the guys you thought for sure were gone are back?
I mean, I don't even know if this was a joke, but, obviously the Max Crosby news was the biggest news of free agency. I think Evan Neal coming back was the biggest surprise of free agency. And maybe it's because I'm in my Giants world, but I can appreciate that Crosby is a bazillion times bigger. But the surprise level for me with Evan Neal, like I do a thing heading into free agency every year where I take all their free agents. I think there was 27 this year. And I just do coming or going with a quick paragraph on, why I feel that way. I had a pretty good hit rate going for a while, and it's gone off the track with some of the guys they brought back. Evan Neal was the one. If you had to do a confidence level on each one, he would have been number one. Like, he's definitely gone. I nailed that one. Right. Checked that one off. So when he came back, I was stunned. And then Josh Ezeudu, pretty much the same deal. Not, he wasn't a first-round pick. I don't think he's had the contentious relationship with the fans and everything that goes along with that with Neal. But Josh Ezeudu was not a very happy guy last year. You figured they jerked him around so much his first couple of years, and he was constantly hurt. And then last year, he has a calf strain. I think it was in the second or third preseason game. That's like, minor injury. He was going to be out like 2 to 4 weeks. But they did some roster gymnastics around cut day, put him on IR with the plan to bring him back. He was saying in September he was ready, and he was just kind of waiting. The O-line, fortunately for them, stayed healthy. There was never really an avenue. And it just went the whole season. And he never got, I think they even started his clock, but never actually played him. Because, again, there was just, the starting five was already always there. And there was just never an opportunity for him. But he was pretty bitter from my conversation with him late in the year. So I did not expect him to come back. Now, the thing with Neal, the knee-jerk reaction, and people are like, well, it's only a minimum contract. Yeah, like, that's totally understood. Like, you don't hear, they didn't give him a $10 million a year deal. No one ever thought that'd be the case. I just assumed he would want to change the scenery. The fact that he came back on a 1-year deal with $0 guaranteed tells you how weak his market had to have been. I mean, because his agents had to have been combing the market. If he could get anything better than that, which, again, he got literally the minimum, you think he would have jumped at it. And it makes you wonder if he was getting no bites. If teams are like, I don't know, like we'll see maybe down the line. At least the Giants, clearly Harbaugh had to have liked him in the 2022 pre-draft process, which obviously a lot of teams at the time did. Probably few want to admit that now after how things played out. But we know the Cowboys did for one with Jerry Jones holding up their draft board. But so for him to come back, that was surprising. I mean, I understand it's a fresh start coaching-wise, but still a lot of the same people in the building where it has not gone well for the past 4 years, didn't see him coming back. And Ezeudu to a lesser extent. And to Ezeudu's credit, he did get like $400K guaranteed, which that's real guaranteed in a minimum contract. So I guess maybe his issues were strictly with the coaching staff and no ill will towards the front office. And again, Harbaugh probably said, hey, I liked you in the 2022 draft. Giants took you at, I think it was like 67, which is wild to look back at how little they got out of that pick. But hey, we liked you. We would have taken you. Let's run it back, and we'll give you some guarantees. But yeah, for Neal to come back with no guarantees, that was the biggest surprise. Again, not the biggest story, but by far the biggest surprise.
Sticking with the offensive line for a second too, and I just want to compliment you because you do on X, you do a lot of contract stuff and tweet out the updates and tweet out the when the details come out on the base salary, the guarantees. It's great. So I appreciate that you do that. Matter of fact, some of your colleagues who've been on our show compliment you as being the guy in the booth while they're grabbing the food. You got the binoculars out and you're watching the field trying to figure out who's going to be active and inactive. They say Ken's always out there focused on what's going on in the field. So your attention to the detail is appreciated here.
I appreciate that.
So if I say something wrong here in the contract, correct me, but I would think the Giants have to be pretty satisfied with the Illuminor contract because I think most of us expected that he was going to get more on the open market, and it's it's still a big contract, $39 million overall, but I would think that contract is fairly reasonable based on the supply and demand of the free agent, especially at the tackle market out there.
Oh no, I think that's the best deal because I was on a different interview and they asked me my favorite signing, and I can't remember what I said. But it's like you kind of get tunnel vision. You forget like your re-signings can be the most valuable thing you do in certain off seasons. And I think by far getting him, at $13 million a year. You know, it was hard to project his market because he's kind of got a funky career path. You know, he didn't really play the first handful of years, and he was bouncing around positions all the time. Now you talk to him, you know, he thinks his best ball is ahead of him. And I did an interview with him leading into free agency. He didn't run from the fact that he thinks he's the best right tackle in the NFL. Now, maybe deep in his heart, he might give it to Lane Johnson or Penei Sewell, but all these guys kind of have to have a delusional level of self-confidence, and he's just not afraid to say it. I mean, you've seen him after matchups with Watt, with Hutchinson. He doesn't back down at all. So, that's just kind of background. But so I was just like, what's the comp for him? And I was looking, there was a handful of guys, like a trio of guys in the last couple of years, all veteran guys on their second and third contracts. It was, I knew this stuff chapter and verse like 2 weeks ago, but free agency, it goes fast. I know McKivitz was one. I want to say Conklin was one, and I'm drawing a blank on the third one. But they all signed for about $15 million a year, and they were all about 28 to 30, so kind of the same stage of their career. So I kind of thought that would be a baseline for Illuminor. And then you look at the fact that Illuminor is a better pass protector. Those guys were in that trio. I think McGarry was the third one. They're all more known as run blockers, and obviously pass protection is more valuable. And then you see the Titus Howard trade, and he signs a 3-year, $63 million extension. He's getting $21 million a year. So I'm saying, man, is this guy going to push $20 million a year? I really thought he might, based on, because even the metrics were really strong with him in pass protection. But I talked to league sources, and I got a wide range. 13 was the low. So yeah, hats off to the Giants. They didn't know where to spend, because even talking to people were saying, like at least 13. I had people going up to 18. No one I talked to was at 20. I just kind of thought maybe the Howard thing would be a baseline for him. I'm sure in Illuminor's camp, they probably wanted it to be that, and they couldn't get there, obviously. But yeah, I mean, 13, to me, that's a steal.
That's a big deal, yeah.
And the
I just wanted to see what your take was on that.
Yeah, and the one thing I heard that when the person who was the lowest on him, I said, well, why would he be so cheap? Why would he be below those guys that were getting 15? And it's funny, he said, part of it is the way you enter the league or being a journeyman, that gets held against you, which, you would think that these guys are only watching film from last year, making their evaluations and assigning a value. But it's kind of hard to outrun your past. And he's a guy who's hit the market time and time again and signed 1-year deals for the minimum, 1 year's for $3 million. Even the Giants, they just got him on a bargain, 2 years for $14 million a couple years ago. And so teams have that's their evaluation of him. Sure, he might have played better, but they're not going to sit there and say, we're going to take a guy who was a $7 million player and he's going to become $20 million. It's just, it doesn't really happen that often, especially this late in his career. So that's something that, until I spoke to that source really late leading into free agency, why I was probably high, because I was like, well, look, good tackles get paid. And then the person I spoke to was like, yeah, but there's kind of a little bit of a stain when you have a guy who's bounced around, never really had a home, never really cashed in. And that's why you see other guys who will maybe be, first round picks and kind of don't really hit. But then he got that on the second contract despite limited production. It's because the teams, their most thorough evaluation was in the draft process, and they really liked him. And they're like, all right, we still see something here. It's worth investing in him. Whereas a guy like Illuminor on the other end, it's like, hey, we've already kind of been there, done that. He's not our type of guy. He's not whatever. And then obviously his market gets suppressed. And I was very impressed and surprised they got him for that rate.
All right, quick follow-up. Just because a quick follow-up, John, on this. So the fans are hyper-focused now on right guard. And it seemed like the Giants had some interest in Vera Tucker, who went out and signed with New England to a huge deal that seems sort of reset the market for the guards. I'm not trying to put you on the spot if you don't know anything, but we get a lot of questions and angst from Giants fans about, there are a few guards that are still out there, not many, but Bitonio's out there, Zeitler's out there, Greg Groton's out there, for instance, Falela is out there. Is your sense that they're waiting for the draft now, or maybe they're waiting for some prices to come down on people, or you just haven't heard anything on right guard?
No, it's definitely a price factor. And it's interesting because free agency is so fluid. Because like you said, they were after Vera Tucker. I think he signed really late the first night of free agency. I had actually gone to bed. I usually try and stay up pretty late, but that one broke at 12:30, 1 a.m., I want to say. And obviously, like you said, he got a really strong deal there from the Patriots. Comes out to $14 million a year. Now there's a lot of he has to play a lot of roster per game bonuses to get it up to that. I think it's like $4.5 million, which that's an exceptional amount per year. But again, it's a wise kind of hedge by the Patriots based on his injury history. But they were interested in him. I think one thing, and I'll take a big picture for a second, is they've been very disciplined. And I know Joe Schoen gets crushed for everything. I don't think he's had too many crazy overpays in free agency. I'm sure there'd be a contract here and there, but he's very much been a guy who's, line in the sand. I won't pay, obviously Saquon's the greatest example of that, where like he set a value and he was not willing to go above it. And I think Harbaugh and Donna Ponte coming in, they have, even reinforced that more. Like they've been in on guys, but they're not getting in bidding wars. And if they think Vera Tucker's worth, let's just say 10 million a year, I don't know what their number was. Once it got to 12 and 14, they weren't going to say, what's another couple million? They were like, nope, we're out. And so they moved off of him. And I think the natural suspicion, because you're not getting real-time reporting on everything they're thinking or doing, obviously there's a lot of moving pieces. The assumption initially was, okay, well, they'll just go to the next right guard on the market. And let's just say that was Wyatt Teller. And then nothing happened for like a week or even longer. I mean, he just signed a couple of days ago, I feel like. I heard they weren't as interested in him as maybe others have reported or was assumed. And this is one of those things where a lot of times there's connections and you say, oh, well, this guy coached this player. He's going to want him. Right. But we forget that sometimes it goes the other way. And that's why I was actually, John, you mentioned at the top with Likely. I was a little iffy on him. He made a lot of sense on paper, but I heard he wasn't super happy with his role in Baltimore. And so I was wondering, is that going to work against the Giants' favor? Because maybe he had some sort of ill will towards Harbaugh. Clearly, that wasn't the case, or $40 million made any smooth over any hard feeling, but certainly that wasn't the case. But my point being here with Mike Bloomgren, the O-line coach, he was in Cleveland last year. And now we all hear Wyatt Teller, we think Pro Bowls, we think all pros. His play has definitely declined. He got benched late in the season. Now, I didn't know going into free agency was that, usually that's not the O-line coach's decision. It's the head coach, or it could even be coming from above him. But Bloomgren was there, front row seat for that, so you didn't know if he was agreeing with that evaluation and might not, pound on the table. We got to spend $10 million a year. What do you get, $8 million? Whatever Teller ended up getting, they weren't interested in going to that price. So that brings us to your actual question. Yeah, I think they're just waiting for prices to come down. I mean, now they have $4 million, we'll say, in cap space today. They can easily create plenty more if they wanted to. If they wanted to compete with that Teller offer, it's not like, oh, we only got $4 million. Our hands are tied. They could have. They didn't want to. And as you said, there are still some enticing names out there. So I kind of thought the Teller signing would maybe start some dominoes in the guard market because it had been so stagnant, and it hasn't. So I think both sides are probably dug in. Like if you're Kevin Zeitler, let's just say, I think he signed 1 year, $9 million last year. Maybe that's what he thinks. Hey, I played good enough to just run it back on that contract. And every other team is like, listen, I want to pay you $4 million or $5 million. Neither side really has that much reason to budge right now, today. So it's a little bit of a game, like a staring contest here, where Zeitler, fine, I'll wait till July and sign before camp if you're going to give me $5 million. I can get that from, a dozen teams in July. I might think my price is, again, I'm making the numbers up. I might think it's 9. I'm not coming to the Giants, or I'm not coming to whatever team for below what I think I'm worth. And again, if we get deeper, closer to the draft, right after the draft, after the draft is a big timeline because that's when guys stop counting toward the comp pick formula. So you might see a signing the first week in May that you're saying, what took so long? It's like, well, if we paid him $5 million then, we might have canceled out this signing, cost ourselves a 4th round comp pick. That type of thing factors in. And then Van Roten is the other one where it's kind of felt like last year, and again this year, he's been their fallback plan. And last year, they went hard after Will Fries. He got a huge contract in Minnesota. They bowed out of that, and it was like, okay, Greg Van Roten, he's still here. Signed him for like $3.5, $4 million. It was great value once again. Guy never misses a snap, is reliable, is a good locker room guy, serviceable player. Now but in his opinion, I've just played 2 solid seasons, haven't missed a snap. I don't really necessarily want to be your fallback plan. I'd be happy to come back to the Giants. It's, and we all talk about hometown discounts. He is a local guy. He's advanced in his career, has young kids. It is enticing for him to stay here. So the Giants, I'm sure, would win any tie. But what if, I don't know, throw out a team that you wouldn't necessarily want to go to, but the Cardinals are going to double the Giants offer, whatever. That probably isn't going to happen at this stage. But I don't think he's just going to, I'm taking whatever the Giants will offer. So they probably have to be careful there with stringing him along too much. I don't sense that he has a super strong market. But I think if he signs somewhere else and the Giants haven't signed a guard, that's probably when I'd get a little nervous as a fan. Like, wait, what are we doing here? Because, at some point, the musical chairs, the seats will get taken. You don't want to be left without a seat and going into the draft like, oh, crap, at 37, we have to take a guard. There are enough names out there right now that I wouldn't panic. Like I said, GVR would be the one where it's elsewhere and they haven't signed anyone. I'd get a little nervous. I think as we sit here today, they're content to just kind of wait it out, hope prices come down. And if it's not until May, listen, the first game is, not until September. So they have time to decide. But I think that's where they're at. They're not willing to go above their budget for these guys. And they probably feel like there's enough viable options, we can wait it out and get someone closer to what we want to pay.
Well, I want to maximize the time that I allotted for you, and I'm trying to keep it tight for you. So I want to go to cap a little more, because you just mentioned something that it's very true. Giants can make a ton of cap space. They haven't, and in some ways you got to applaud them a little bit. They could have done a ton, rearranged, moved stuff, and really added on, but they're kind of playing it smart. That being said, every year it seems like we're at a point where they've got to do stuff to make room. So right now, as we sit, like you said, I think it's just under $4 million. That's like 3 and change that they have available. John Runyon was a thought that they might move on from him with that contract. Clearly, with the way the offensive line is right now, you don't want to make another weakness at guard. He seems like he's staying. There's a couple other spots now that they could do. Dexter Lawrence's contract is still there. Andrew Thomas' contract's there. Adebo's contract kind of looks like they could play around with that. If there is to be some movement, because obviously to get somebody they're going to have to, who do you think is most likely to get that deal kind of redone?
Okay, yeah. So there's a bunch of different buckets here. So we'll go with the easiest one first. Like Graham Gano, like he's gonna be cut. Like I see people like paying. Why isn't he cut? Like that one's complicated because he had the neck surgery. And I tweeted about this, so I won't bore people with it here. You can find it, but like there's this injury protection in the CBA where if this turns out to be a career-ending injury, the Giants could end up on the hook for like $2.1 million next year. Obviously, they don't want to do that for a player they have no use for. So they don't want. You can cut guys with failed physical too. I see that a lot of the time. Like, oh well, he can't pass a physical. That's why they're not cutting him. That's not the case. You'll see it constantly. Guys get cut with a failed physical. The team doesn't really assume that much risk because if you cut, let's say they cut Micah McFadden. Micah McFadden's going to go play football somewhere next year, so they wouldn't be on the hook for that 2.1. You get nervous with a 38-year-old kicker. There's only 32 of those jobs in the league. He's made a lot of money. He might say, I don't know if I need to go chase another contract if I can just cash in $2.1 million. Now, again, this is like I'm 90% sure that's what's happened. No one has explicitly told me. It's the only thing that makes sense because I have checked in.
Right.
Like, you guys aren't planning on keeping him. I was told in no uncertain terms, no, he will not be back. I'm not sure when that date will be. Like, They need to bring him in for physical, have him pass the physical, so they're off the hook, and then they cut him. But there's no need to rush that because if you bring him in and fail the physical, it probably gets a lot more complicated. There'll be grievances, there'll be lawyers, there'll be agents involved. So I'm assuming they know whatever that timeline is from that surgery, and they're keeping that timeline to themselves. But again, so there's $4.5 million. That was a long-winded start to this question. It's probably going to become a long-winded answer. The simplest thing is restructures. That's just, they just did it with Brian Burns. All you're doing is just taking the guy's base salary way down, spreading it into a bonus that can be prorated over the remaining years in the contract. With Andrew Thomas, he's the obvious guy because he's signed from now to eternity, so you can just keep spreading money into his contract forever. And I mean, people might look, oh, they moved, I don't know what the number off the top of my head. Let's just say it's 15 million or use a round number. But you spread that over the next 3-4 years, it's 3 to 4 million a year. It's really not that big of a difference. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So that's the obvious one. If they need to create space, and again, Gano's only 4.5. You could keep going further to guys like Adebo or Javon Holland. Anyone who has a decent sized base salary, you can do it with. I just think they tend to, at least with Shane. Again, that we'll see how much things change because guys, some new sheriffs in town. He's kind of done it as a last resort, or he's done it with guys he's confident will be here long term. So maybe you might be saying, if Adebo and Holland don't play better this year, we might want to get out of those contracts, rather than adding more dead money into the final year of their deals. Then you go to Dexter. He's another guy, easy restructure. He's only got 2 years left, so not a ton of years to kick it into the future. And they didn't restructure him last year, and it stuck out all year as a guy that they could have. And I think the reason they did not is because he wants more money. And now they can restructure it at their own discretion. It's written into his contract. It's called an automatic conversion. They don't have to get his approval. It's clerical work. They just send an email. We're doing this. Changes nothing for him.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay,
yeah.
So the player doesn't have to agree to that.
Not a restructure, because all that's.
Really?
That's just cap accounting. So let's just say your base salary, I'm sure it is at BBI, is $10 million a year. I can cut your base salary down to $2 million turn $8 million into the, the restructure. And that's what I'm saying.
Right.
That $8 million gets spread out over the next 4 years, $2 million in 27, 28, 29.
Right.
But you're still getting the $10 million this year. So it changes nothing for you. It's strictly.
Oh, I know that. I just always thought the player had to sign off on it.
That specific one, no. I mean, if you're talking about extending anything, but if it's just moving the money around, like when you hear the word restructure, and that's why I kind of get annoyed when reporters misuse these terms, like a pay cut's not a restructure. Devin Singletary to a pay cut. That was not a restructure. But so they can do that. But I think there's also a human element. If this guy wants more money, do I want to be making any sort of transactions with him about money, but not giving him more? So I honestly think that is probably why they haven't touched his. Now, the way to get him maybe more on board or not have to ruffle any feathers is give him an extension. You could certainly do that. Lower his cap hit this year, give him more money in a signing bonus and give him 2 more years. Like that's an easy way for him. He'd certainly jump at that. Seems like they're not dying to do that. But I mean, they still, at the end of the day, if they need money to sign the draft class, they can go to Dex's contract and get it. No questions asked. It just might be politically, it might not be the smoothest move for them.
Right.
Kavon.
There we go.
It's out there, $15 million. That's a nice chunk right there. You can probably get by for a long time without doing anything else. If you get Gano off the books and trade Kavon, you're probably good. Like you probably don't need to restructure anybody else or worry about any of this other stuff we've talked about. I don't think they're dying to give him away. I mean, they obviously probably would have already by now. If that was the case, they're not so desperate for that cap space. But I think if they got a strong offer, they'd certainly be willing. If they got a second round pick, he'd be gone. I feel pretty confident in saying. Third round pick, I think they'd certainly listen. Any later than that, I don't think, I think that's why he's still here because they haven't gotten any better than that. And then the other avenue with him could be player for player, and those are harder to project. But you saw the Jets do one with Jermaine Johnson right before free agency, so that would be a way to get $15 million. I think that's all. I mean, yeah, because then like the pay cut stuff that usually happens before free agency. They did it with Singletary. They haven't done it with like a guy like Runyon or Slayton. Because with Slayton, he had no motivation to accept one. Singletary, another guy like Neal and Azudu. When you're willing to take a pay cut to the minimum, that tells you that your agent kind of sniffed around and said, you might as well just take this so you have a roster spot because there wasn't a ton of interest maybe when he called around to some GMs and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that is all of them, but obviously that's a lot. I mean, there's a ton of different ways to create space without doing anything crazy, without jeopardizing your future. So yeah, like you look at the cap today and it's like, ooh, it's a little tight. Very easily you can create more. And then the other thing they haven't done at all is void years, which is a whole nother discussion. But let's just say they want Kevin Zeitler and it is going to be $10 million a year. You can sign him 1 year's $10 million, throw 4 void years on it, and his cap hit this year's like $2 million. Like that's out of the Eagles playbook. You can do stuff like that too. So they have plenty of flexibility. It just depends how aggressive they want to be and how they want to go. If I was to project the order of operations, Gano eventually gets cut, and Andrew Thomas probably gets restructured, and then kind of see where you're at from there.
If you had a sense right now versus maybe trade deadline or makes it through the season, where are you leaning towards Kavon either being gone and when, or you think he makes it all the way through the season as a Giants player? Yeah,
it's a great question. I don't think he gets traded before the season because I just don't think I think if someone wanted him badly enough, they probably would have already made the offer because again, a lot of that stuff happens. We always see these trades announced and it's like becomes official on the first day of the league year, which obviously is long past at this point. Usually you're not seeing a ton of trades at this stage. Now we might log off here and I look foolish when breaking news came on Twitter. It's tough to speak in absolutes on these types of things, but I just don't sense that there's going to be a knock your socks offer coming in for him if it hasn't already. And so I think if you look at it from their perspective, they want to win games this year. He's a good player. You have, obviously 2 really good edge rushers. You feel good about their parts of the future. So that's where it gets a little dicey with Kavon. But for 2026, you're a better football team with Kavon Thibodeaux on the field, complimenting Burns, complimenting Carter, especially the whole Carter as a chess piece. Like you can really still have some great third down packages. You take Kavon out of that equation. If the return is worth it, you'll live with it. But that front 4 gets a little less formidable if it's Chauncey Golston in there or, whoever else is going to be that extra guy, in the edge rush rotation. But I think what the trade deadline is a good point to reference because I just don't see Kavon coming back here. So if you get to the deadline and things aren't going well, you're out of it. I think it's one of those situations where it would make sense. There's probably going to be a contender who's had a guy go down or just has a weakness at edge that they weren't able to fix, and they weren't willing to give you the pick you wanted for Kavon in the spring. But now it's like, well, hey, teams get a little desperate when they can sniff the playoffs. We're 5-3 at the trade deadline. And all of a sudden we think Kavon's the guy who gets us over the hump. Now we will part with that 3rd round pick that we wouldn't, 5 months ago when, having the talk. So I think that's certainly a checkpoint. But then you also could play it out. And if he has a good year and the Giants are doing well, that's great. You deal with this problem next year. And maybe it's you probably aren't able to re-sign him because if he has a good year, it's probably be too pricey. But then you get in the comp pick game and he goes and signs a big contract somewhere else. Right. And now that's something that, obviously you saw time and time again with the Ravens. So yeah, he's very interesting to track. And I don't think it's like we'll ever be fully off Kavon watch. I think up until the trade deadline, I think his name's going to be bandied about, obviously, if he's not moved sooner.
Kind of related to this, we had a great question in our Q&A show, which we just had this last weekend, where someone asked, have we seen any impact of Dawn Aponte being with the team? And I had to think for a minute, and I came to the conclusion that not really. If Kevin Abrams was still here, they pretty much operate. I mean, there have been some really interesting, nice contracts for the Giants, like the Mooney contract and the Austin contract were fairly low, and I think you tweeted about that as well too. I think those are I mean, in terms of what they're getting, I think those were reasonable contracts. But we haven't seen the void years. I don't think we've seen anything noticeably different. But I just wanted to get your opinion on. It seems like to date, I expect this to change. We haven't really, as an outsider looking in, we haven't seen anything noticeably different yet.
No, I think you're dead on. I'm probably going to actually dive into that. So like preview, I'll probably put this in print maybe later this week because I want to still get a few more details. The incentive stuff is usually the last thing to kind of make its way into my hands. I don't have all those details yet on Mooney because I am fascinated by the structure of that. Usually when you're talking incentives, like I think Newsom's, like I don't have any of the incentives yet. But I think Newsom's deal was reported, and it is 1 year's $8 million base value. It was reported as up to 10. That makes sense. $2 million, it's like a little bonus. I'm sure it's based on a couple of interceptions. Maybe if he gets a Pro Bowl, it's usually a little hard to reach even. I can't think of a time with the Giants contract, at least, where the base value is $3 million for Mooney, which that much I know is confirmed. Assuming those reports are accurate, and they were, from respected reporters, I'm sure no reason to think they weren't. $7 million more in incentives is a huge sum. I mean, you can more than triple the value of your contract in incentives. And, he had a down year last year, so I can easily see those kind of structured in a way where it's like if it's, it's $500K if he has 40 catches, another 500 if it's 50, 60, 70. So it just keeps going up. So if he has an amazing year, it would add up. If he has this best career year of, 80 catches, 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns, that's how he's getting to $7 million. I'm sure it won't be easy to get there, but that's the only thing that I think that's kind of uncommon, period. I don't know if that's like the DNA of a Dawn Aponte front office or contract structure. That just seems like a rare deal. But otherwise, I don't think there's anything too crazy. And I think it's very common, as we talked about on the top. I've gone through a lot of these regime changes. Obviously, everything the last guy did was bad. Everything the new guy did was good. And like the old anything about, didn't know anything about anything. The new person's, everything's innovative and creative. Again, it looks like the way if Kevin Abrams is running for agency, I don't know that it would look any different because again, it's the front office and the scouting department and the coaching staff, they kind of set the values, and then it's on the cap person to hammer out the negotiations. But they like when Kenny Galladay got $72 million, that wasn't Kevin Abrams saying I'm going to give he's following orders. So when you look at the deals, like you said, no void years. And that isn't even really a cap person decision or a GM person or a coach. That's ownership. That's what Jeffrey Lurie gives his organization a tremendous advantage because he's willing to fund all those void years because that's real cash that's going out. And I think the Giants are probably middle of the pack-ish. I should know this. I can definitely research it, but I think they're like middle of the pack in terms of cash spending. They're not, they're not the most frugal team in the league, but they aren't doing void years. And I think fans look at void years as like this dirty word and like, oh, the Eagles are just exploiting the system as they should. And if you're a fan, I would want my team to do it. Who cares? Everyone keeps talking about like when it's going to catch up to them. It's like, well, in this last decade, they've been to 3 Super Bowls and won 2 of them.
Right.
So all right, let it catch up to me. Then the Giants didn't do void years and look at their last decade. So I wouldn't panic too much about that. Or even the Saints, we all laughed at them like, oh, it's going to catch up to them. It's like, well, they went crazy when they had a Hall of Fame quarterback. They tried to extend it. They were always still like a 500-ish team. They've obviously had a few down years. And now there was a tweet that they didn't do any void years this year. It's like they're back to almost like cap neutral, so it's like the cap just isn't as punitive as I think we've all been led to believe. And I think that's a lot of times teams put that speak out there because it justifies why they're not as aggressive as, it looks like they could be. And it's really just comes down to if ownership is willing to shell out. Now, again, strategically, maybe it isn't great to max out your credit card, but with the way the cap just keeps going up and, as long as another COVID shutdown that, sends it going the other way, it's going to keep going up. So I think it's just a wise way to operate. And I really thought they might engage in that when you have the rookie quarterback. You have the coach. John Harbaugh didn't come in here to build this thing for 10 years. He's trying to win and win soon. So I'm actually a little surprised by that. But that to me tells me it's probably ownership did not green light. Like, yeah, we're going to just, open checkbook and throw void years in every contract and max out. They're still being measured. So again, I don't think that was a Kevin Abrams mandate. I don't think it's a Don Aponte mandate. I think it's an ownership mandate.
So you have not, like I said, we haven't seen any change really.
No.
Noticeable.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Long answer. Long answer. The short one is no. It looks very similar to me.
And just real quick, I was checking while you were talking. Yeah, NFLPA confirms it. Mooney's base salary is $1.215 million, and he's got a signing bonus of $1.785 million. So a total of $3 million on 1 year. So yeah, the incentives are going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, I wanted to keep it super tight. So I'm gonna let you go on this piece of it right here, and then after that, let everybody know what you're doing this week, where they can find you, all that good stuff. If you were to say, there's a lot of talk about the Giants are already in love with Love. One guy in particular seems to really be just pounding that drum. I think it's his Saquon drum. He just pulls it out and he just applied a different name to it. Are you getting that sense too? The Giants definitely seem to be building around a physical run, play action team, all from that big size and running game. Does that lead you to think that Jeremiah Love is really a main target, or at least certainly one of their top targets in the draft?
Yeah, I think I just saw it today. The draft is a month away, so I gotta really kick it into draft gear because it's you dive so deep into free agency, and that's like I've had tunnel vision on that now. Yeah, kind of coming up for air on that because it's kind of more or less put it to bed. Other than like we're talking, maybe one of those guard signings down the road. So I can't sit here and say, I've canvassed the league and 8 league sources say Love is the guy. I think more reporters are further along, and at the Athletic, I'm very lucky that we have Dane Brugler. So like that probably is too much of a crutch for me. I'm like, I'll let Dane kind of run through the draft stuff, and I'll just coast off of him. But yeah, as we get closer, I'll certainly do more digging. But yeah, there's enough smoke there. I know smoke is everyone's favorite term at this time of year. But no, listen, I would certainly not doubt it. I mean, sure. They clearly want to be a run first, smash mouth football team. And I think if you just look at the weapons on this team, I think there's still some room there for improvement for sure. And if it's not a year where you don't feel like any of these wide receivers are Malik Neighbors wide receiver, then you're probably not going to take one at 5. But if you do feel like, Love is the next Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, there's been early picks besides Saquon who have gone to teams and been really good players. Now, Bijan hasn't really impacted the fortunes of the Falcons, and that's what you'd be afraid of, I think. But Gibbs has been a huge piece of what they've done in Detroit. I think it's a little different than 2018. Like I was the most staunch anti-running back at number 2 guy you could find in 2018. And I think over time I was proven right. There was a few times where I was like, oh, maybe I'm not, like in 2022 sure. when Saquon kind of was the engine that led them to the playoffs. And I do think there's some differences here. Like at least you do have the quarterback this year, whereas at that point you're trying to like do some cling to Eli and Saquon's gonna usher you to like one last run. Like that was obviously so foolish and misguided. I think probably the bigger difference for me is in that draft you were picking second with everybody wanted the quarterbacks. So you could have traded back and gotten a haul like we saw obviously the Colts did with the Jets coming up, got all those second round picks, and you got Quentin Nelson. There's nobody knocking down their door for the 5th pick for a quarterback. So if you're sitting there at 5 and you can't trade back, I think ideally that's what I would do almost regardless of who's on the clock. I think for them, trade back, not to 25, but if you can trade back a few picks and pick up another day 2 pick, I think that's probably the best thing for this team. But you can't bank on that because who's coming up and who are they coming up to get? So if they're sitting there at 5 and, we don't know how the first 4 picks will go, but it's certainly conceivable that Jeremiah Love will be hands down the best player on their board. Like they can't run from it, no pun intended. And they just feel like that's the best player. Like would be reaching if we take another guy. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But the other complicating factor, if you want to talk positional value, It's like, well, Sonny Styles plays inside linebacker and Caleb Downs plays safety. Neither one of those positions is a wide receiver, an edge rusher, a left tackle that are the market value is just through the roof where you can't turn it down. So I can see it for sure. Like, so I'm not sitting here at this point to say, oh, my sources say we'll be at the owners meetings next week. So get around, Harbaugh and Shane and some more Giants people and just other people around the league. So I think hopefully I'll be able to, do a little more original reporting at that point. And then going forward, it'll really pick up. But at this point, yeah, I think there's no reason to deny it, to doubt it. It'll be even further evidence of who's running the show, because there's no way in hell Joe Schoen would be using the number 5 pick on a running back left to his own devices. So that would clearly be a John Harbaugh-driven decision. But listen, all these decisions are driven by John Harbaugh at this stage. And yeah, he might say, listen, I was just with a great running quarterback. We had a Derrick Henry, and we had, I think it was like the most yards in NFL history 2 years ago. And he might just look at it and say, hey, I can maybe do a facsimile of that with Jackson Dart and Jeremiah Love. And, that he doesn't think that they have the pieces to have an unbelievable passing attack. But Patrick Ricard and Love and Scatterbo, we can have an amazing running attack. So I could absolutely see it playing out that way.
Do you, last thing real quick, because you just mentioned it, do you expect John Mara to be at these owner meetings, or no, he's definitely not going to be there?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate, but I'll speculate. I don't think so. I mean, he wasn't even traveling to road games. I don't know exactly where he's at with his treatment, but I would just, that's in Arizona this year even, so it's a long flight. So I would guess he won't be there. I would guess Steve Tisch won't be there. He's probably gonna keep it a low profile around a bunch of reporters. And then, so yeah, it'd actually be interesting to see who's going to be. I assume Chris Mara will probably be the representative, and we don't know if he'll even speak. The coaches have a mandated, breakfast where they sit down with other reporters for half an hour. Joe Schoen speaks every year. I'm sure he'll speak. No one from ownership spoke last year, which was a major break from tradition. It never happened on my time in the beat, and even going back further, I hadn't heard that. So there's at least a precedent this year where it's not like they're ducking it specifically because of the Tisch stuff, because John Mara didn't speak last year and he was there. But yeah, I would assume ownership will keep a low profile, but we don't know with Chris Mara, because again, all this change, all this newness,
right.
After the Harbaugh presser, he was not shy about, stepping up and speaking. It was kind of refreshing to get a different voice we haven't heard a lot from. So maybe he'll be the one to speak for the organization, but yeah, otherwise I would not expect to see or hear from John Mara or Steve Tisch next week.
Got you. So let everybody know what you got coming up this week, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So obviously on Twitter, it's Duggan21. I kind of tone it down in the offseason, but I'm sure if you follow me, I can ramp it up at times. Certainly The Athletic. Hopefully everyone who's listening to this is enough of a Giants fan that they're subscribing there to get my coverage, along with Charles Carroll and obviously Ian O'Connor, who's been the newcomer of the year. I mean, he's been around forever, but he only joined The Athletic not too long ago. And I mean, I just was able to kick my feet up here in the coaching search, because he was just dominant. Talking about way to make a good first impression as a teammate. I was like, okay, this will work. He was as plugged into that as I've ever seen any reporter on any search. So hopefully that's enough of a sales job for our coverage. Even if you don't like me, read it for Charlotte and Ian and Dane Brugo. The beast pays for the subscription alone. You want to learn about draft guys. And yeah, this week I think I'm going to kind of put a bow on free agency. And as I say this, I just get so nervous about doing these interviews during busy times, because I'll log off and probably find out Kavon got traded. They signed a Kevin Zeitler. So best laid plans might go to waste here. But I think I'll try to put a bow on what they've done, get into some of that cap stuff that we mentioned, and then, like I said, kind of shift gears. We'll go to the owners' meetings next week, so it'll be good to get another touch point with Harbaugh and just kind of see where they feel about the roster and what's ahead, and then it'll be kind of pedal to the metal on the draft. I can't come on this interview in 4 weeks and say, I don't really know too much about the draft. It's time to start and getting some intel for you.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a busy time of season, and we'll let you go. And everybody, we'll check it out. I'll link everything in the description and stuff for you as well. And we'll keep following, and we'll catch up again, hopefully right before or right after the draft would be awesome.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. All right, so that was Dan Duggan. We were able to get that in the middle of the day on a Monday. We're gonna wrap that up. We're gonna get this done. So, Eric, closing thoughts, real quick.
Yeah, he just great answers, and he was very expansive. I mean, I had a bunch of other questions, but he was so detailed on his answers that it didn't leave us time for more questions. But I could have easily gone another hour with him with specifics on free agent questions, but no, that was really good. And I actually learned some things too about, I know it's minor, but I thought players had to agree to being structured. I never knew that. So
yeah, I thought so too. I mean, I thought you could play around with maybe like, you know, just some paper stuff on the bonus stuff, but this is like restructuring the way, but it is just, you know, it's a shell. Here's your money. Yeah. But I thought with you as well, like they have to pick up the phone and go, dude, do you mind?
Are you good with it? And there's no reason for the player not to be good with it, but I just thought they had to get their blessing, you know, a signature or something.
Exactly.
You know,
yeah,
something.
Something.
But yeah, the only thing I wish we could have got more time to get in on the free agent, and there's a lot on the free agency, but I really wanted, again, if he thought they were going to sign a defensive lineman still, I would be surprised if they don't. So I know he said he's going to try to wrap this up. But I still kind of expect them. My final comment is this: I kind of still expect them to sign a guard, a veteran guard, and even if they intend to draft one high, I think they want to have. You don't want to be in the position where you have to start a rookie, and I still think they're going to add a veteran defensive lineman at some point. So that's that. And I did kind of want to make a joke, but it's not. Yeah, don't count out Evan Neal or Josh Azudu still with the offensive line. I know people have written them off completely, but this is going to be a different regime.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I would not bet my house that there's no way Evan Neal is not your starting right guard on opening day. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would not make that bet. You know, like I think there's a 1 in 100 chance, but I think it's enough of a chance that it could happen.
Okay.
Remember, we didn't think he was going to come back.
No, that's true. I mean,
and Baltimore had Falela, like you keep saying, they had Falela.
Very similar.
Huge difference between Falela and Evan Neal. I don't know if there's a huge difference other than health, being able to stay on the field.
Well,
wise.
I mean, size and ability, they're probably this. In fact, you would say athletically, you would think Neal might actually be a better athlete. He just hasn't put that on the field.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm with you. You don't know, right? Like crazier things have happened. I can't think of one at the moment, but but I know there has been. So
they won't count on it. And Harbaugh's not going to count on it. I'm just saying he's on the roster now. Don't count him out.
So with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll let you know when we're going to be doing another one. But like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we're going to catch you again real soon.
Get your Inside BBI merch here.
Thank you. BBI merch. Right here. Get your Inside BBI merch. Right.